All right, guys, a quick fun one, or at least more fun than my rant about the signature bank abomination from before. So today something interesting happened, given that there's been so much chaos and volatility, given that one of the biggest crypto banks that was still around was kneecapped yesterday in what basically appears to be a regulatory assassination. In spite of all of that, Bitcoin is up nearly 20%. And anytime Bitcoin goes up like this, especially in a confusing moment, I think it's worth asking why and kind of exploring that. And I think that there are three possible explanations right now. One has to do with sort of narrative, and this being an interesting moment for people coming to understand Bitcoin. A second has to do with liquidity and just more money coming into the system, more funds coming back into the system. And a third has to do with market structure. And I'm actually going to focus on the liquidity and market structure pieces first. So from a liquidity standpoint, there is a sense now with this new Fed facility around backstopping or helping banks who have these underwater loans get loans from the Fed against them rather than having to go sell them on the open market, that represents a return to QE, right? You see Arthur Hayes from BitMEX yesterday saying, get ready for a face-ripping rally. And certainly there is some evidence of this. This morning we woke up to huge, crazy moves down in bank stocks, but overall the S&P 500 is up today. This has some people in disbelief, but again, the reality, the belief is that this crisis in banking is actually going to force the Fed's hand. Now, this could be undone. This could be changed pretty quickly from the perspective of the markets, depending on what Powell and co. do in the next FOMC meeting. However, right now, markets are broadly making a bet that we have kind of started to top out on the rate hiking cycle because we have officially gotten to that point of breaking things. In that context, Bitcoin acts as a risk asset. Risk assets are doing better, blah, 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 blah. Now, of course, Bitcoin was way up compared to everything else out there, and Bitcoin started to move up even before the S&P 500 did, but liquidity is one possible explanation. Another possible explanation, which is somewhat less fun or less entertaining, but is real and important to consider, is just sort of market structure. CZ tweeted last night, given the changes in stablecoins and banks, Binance will convert the remainder of its $1 billion industry recovery initiative funds from BUSD to native crypto, including Bitcoin, BNB, and ETH. Some fund movements will occur on chain. So CZ does these types of tweets when the Binance is about to make some major move because he knows that otherwise people will spot it and call it out anyways. And so basically you have here Binance moving out of BUSD, which, by the way, remember, has been targeted as a security in the US, and into native coins like Bitcoin. So this potentially represents a pretty significant bid on Bitcoin that could be driving a lot of what's going on. So that's another possibility, is that this is just sort of Binance loading up on Bitcoin for this industry recovery fund, moving it out of BUSD into Bitcoin. But then there's a third possibility, which is more narrative and structural. So this morning, Amanda Cassatt, who formerly of Consensus now runs Serotonin, says, GM, this may be the first time I've seen crypto go up because of its actual value proposition. What might Amanda be talking about? Well, of course, this is a moment, this banking crisis, as all banking crises do, that really opens people's eyes to the challenges of the financial system broadly, but the banking system specifically. It is no accident that Bitcoin is integrally tied to crises of the banking system. Remember, Chancellor on the brink of a second bailout for banks. It was built into the Genesis block. And right now you're seeing these questions come up. And it's not just from crypto people, it's from normal people who are nervous, watching banks fail, watching depositors and small businesses not know if they're going to be solvent. And this is happening everywhere. You see banks getting nervous as well. And so in that type of moment, that's sort of tailor-made to what Bitcoin was created for, why Bitcoin was created. And I think Dylan LeClaire does a really great job summing this up, saying Bitcoin narrative has seen the strongest reinforcement in years over the past week. Expect plenty of volatility. Get your coins into personal custody, but steady, lads. There is no alternative. I think there's a lot of all of these three things going on right now. One, certainly I do think that markets are making a bet that Powell's hand is forced. Now, they've made this bet over and over and over again for the last year and a half, ever since this rate hike cycle began. So I wouldn't expect it to necessarily stick or to be long duration, but there is some amount of this that I have to assume is just liquidity flowing back into risk assets. Second, I think that it's inevitable that part of this is just the Binance buy, right? That bid, it doesn't take much to move these markets, which are pretty thin right now, or the order books are pretty thin right now. So I think that's likely to be part of it as well. But I do think that this narrative is a piece of it. And I don't know how much I would suggest that this narrative is a driver in the short term of this particular movement. I think that combined with those other two factors, it might more strongly be. But I certainly think and agree with Dylan here that over the next, call it year or so, between now and the halving, the new narrative, the new reminder for why Bitcoin has become as clear as it's ever been. And in many ways, this was summed up by a Naval tweet this morning, which is guaranteed to be one of his most popular ever. He writes, "Someday we will look back and realize that there were only two banks all along. The Federal Reserve, the fully centralized bank and all of its branches, and Bitcoin, the fully decentralized bank and all of its stepchildren." So what do you think, guys? Is this just liquidity flooding back into the system? Is this just CZ with a massive bid? Or is this really people understanding why Bitcoin and getting orange pilled? Let me know in the comments, and thanks as always for hanging out. Peace.